Welcome Canada, potentially America, Europe, and of course whatever lawyers hired by whatever Islamist front group there is suing me now for this or in the future. Welcome all. Tonight, the top story is going to be the only story tonight, and I want to go into everything we know about the terrorist attack in Boulder, Colorado right now. And it's not because, the story fits my narrative and not theirs and all these different things, but because of what happened and how it's involved and how this thing's going to play out, this story is going to disappear from mainstream media, and there is a lot that we have to unpack here because there's a lot about the pathology behind this mass shooting which isn't going to get talked about, that I might be the only one in Canada who's going to cover this. So, strap in, as we're going to do everything that we know, everything around it. We're going to go from Biden's shift to gun control, the reaction from the left, which blamed everything on white supremacy, to now it's no longer white supremacy, now we must focus on the victims. What was the motive of the terrorist attack? Why it was likely a jihadist-motivated terrorist attack targeting Jews on Passover, and in every sort of social aspect around this. All right, let's get started. So this comes this week. We had an Islamist terrorist attack in Boulder, Colorado, okay? Or let's just say a mass shooting. Right? There's a mass shooting and 10 people were murdered by what was at first a clear white supremacist. Then we learned his name was Ahmed al-Awlaki. Okay. Now I like the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro's stance that they will not name the attackers of this. They don't glorify them. And to an extent, I totally agree with that. We shouldn't be focusing on the terrorists. We should be focusing on the lives lost because this only inspires copycats. And I would love to do this. However, what we saw is, and especially in the wake of last week's shooting in Atlanta, the identity of the shooter was weaponized by the political left to make the claim that, whiteness in itself was the problem. You even had, contributing writers from the New York Times, not published in the New York Times, but in the Root, basically claim that whiteness was the pandemic. Whiteness is murder, whiteness is causing climate change, whiteness is poisoning the air, whiteness in itself is an insidious phenomenon, okay? And I made the point last week, and a lot of us did, that, good luck watching any leftist retake their stance when the next time an Islamic terrorist attack happens. Are they going to say that Islam is murder? Islam is literally poisoning the air we breathe. Islam is doing this, Islam is doing that. And the answer is no, because that's a ridiculous take. So, this brings us to the Colorado shooting. Now, I could show you all the stupid tweets from the leftists who are claiming white supremacy. I could show you Tariq Nasheed, who's just an absolute grifter. I could show you the Amy Streisfeld, this is whiteness. And then, a couple hours later, we can't focus on the identity of the shooter, and we can, dunk on the left for being hypocrites, but they're hypocrites. They've been dunked on by other people. We're just going to go over the absolute worst take imaginable from the worst, well, not even the worst person, but here was the worst take possible on the entire shooting. Cue the Michael Moore take on this shooting. So here you have Michael Moore basically claiming that Ahmed al-Awlaki was the Syrian immigrant, did such a great job integrating into American culture that he gunned down 10 people. What Michael Moore is trying to make the case for here is that this is gun violence, this is a murder conducted by an AR-15, and it's so American. Mass murder is the American way. That is revolting, logic. It is also a revolting ideology, but hence, Michael Moore. So, this is being portrayed as, this is just American culture. This is just a random mass shooting. Now, there's another thing we need to know. This might not have been so random, right? And the American left does have a history of calling things that are not so random shootings. Before we show you what the supermarket actually kind of was, I will draw your attention to the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attacks. During the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attacks, the original ones, you had the attack on Charlie Hebdo, then you also had a separate jihadist attack on a kosher supermarket in France. Now, Barack Obama called the targeted mass shooting at a kosher supermarket a random act of violence, then said that ISIS has less to do with Islam than any other religion. That's right. When you go into a kosher supermarket and try and specifically murder Jews, Barack Obama called this a random act of violence that had technically more to do with Jewish beliefs than Islamic beliefs. That's right, the Islamic State, or the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, ISIS, or the Islamic State in Levant, ISIL, or the Islamic State, Daesh, which is Islamic State in Arabic, has nothing to do with Islam. Thank you, Barack Obama. Actually, it has less to do with Islam. It's more of a Christian thing. Even the Buddhists. It's less any other religion, even Jainism. So here we have King's Supermarket. So this is from King's Supermarket, the place where the shooting happened, right? Your one-stop shop for kosher groceries. Now, we've learned that King's Supermarket was actually the hub in Denver where most Jews would go to get kosher food. This weekend is Passover. So, to speak my truth here, quick anecdotal evidence, I very rarely eat kosher food. I never really shop for kosher food. My mom used to be kosher, but now she's vegetarian, so it doesn't really matter. But it's Passover coming up, and we'll be cooking for the grandmothers. They do need kosher food. So on Passover, even, less observant Jews like me will go and have to go, and, your wife makes you go to the kosher part of the grocery store to get the Passover stuff. But you need specific kosher for Passover stuff during Passover. So the week when most Jews would be out doing their Passover shopping, he went to this grocery store. Now, that might be coincidental. However, he drove 25 miles to go find this particular grocery store. So if he was just having a bad day, mentally ill, wasn't criminally responsible for his actions, why did he drive 25 miles to target this specific location? Maybe he wanted to get Christians and Jews shopping for Passover and Easter. Maybe he just really hates this particular supermarket. Who knows? But you start to piece all the different things together, and you get the fact that this is likely a targeted attack on Jewish shoppers during Passover. This fits with most jihadi attacks. A lot of famous jihadi attacks. We talked about the Charlie Hebdo one. Let's also talk about the Mumbai attack. We all know the Mumbai attack, the attack in the Mumbai hotel, a Pakistani-backed jihadist in India. The vast majority of the deaths came from that. But also, there was another detachment of jihadis to find a small synagogue where barely anyone went and attacked that during the Mumbai attacks. Did that maximize the amount of death for the jihadists? No, but it was very important to them to murder Jews as well. This is a jihadist thing to do, is target something Jewish. It's what they do. There's not a lot of Orthodox Jews in Boulder, Colorado, right? But this is probably the most Jewish target he could find. Okay, so now I'm going to read to you the CNN article that came out yesterday of what we know. Here's what we know about Boulder, Colorado mass shooting suspect by Ray Sanchez and Blake Ellis. And this is borderline jihadist propaganda. Ahmed al-Alwali Alassi was identified by authorities on Tuesday as the gunman who opened fire at King Scoopers grocery store in Colorado, killing 10 people, including a Boulder police officer. The name of the 21-year-old suspect, who is in custody, was released to news conference by Boulder Police Chief Maris Harold, who did not disclose the possible motive for Monday's bloodshed, but I will. A search for the suspect's suburban Denver home turned out other weapons, a senior law enforcement source said Tuesday. The weapon used in the attack was an AR-15-style pistol, modified with an arm brace, according to the sources. This is so stupid, an AR-15-style pistol. I barely know anything about guns, but, this is just gun steer. Again, what they mean here is semi-automatic. So when liberals say they want to ban semi-automatics is you pull the trigger once and one bullet comes out. So when they say they want to ban semi-automatic weapons, they want to ban guns that fire when you pull the trigger. That's what they're talking about. It's very reasonable gun control. We just want to ban the guns that fire when you pull the trigger. That's the only type of gun we want to ban. What's so wrong with that? Okay, so you can already see the slanting, AR-15 style pistol. There is no such thing as an AR-15 style pistol, but QCNN. Authorities believe Alassi was the only person involved and that there was no additional threat to the community. The shooter began being charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder, 1 charge of attempted murder, according to the arrest warrant. The warrant describes Alassi as being armed with either an assault rifle or black AR-15 and wearing tactical or armored vest. Ahmed al-Alassi, 21, has been named by the police suspect in that shooting in Colorado. The suspect had removed all his clothing and was dressed only in shorts when taken into custody, the affidavit said. Outside the store, the document said Alassi wouldn't tell police if there were other suspects. Using law enforcement databases, the affidavit said investigators determined Alassi had purchased a Ruger .55-6 pistol on March 16th. Michael Daugherty, Boulder County DA, said Lassie is a resident of Arda, Colorado, who has lived most of his life in the United States. Okay, I'm going to pause here, get back to it, and the brother says he was paranoid. So, you already see the narrative being laid out further. They already know, okay, here's how we're going to push the gun control narrative. We're going to say AR-15 style, assault weapon, blah, 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 blah. Use all these buzz terms that CNN, because CNN news consumers don't really know anything about guns. And let's keep them in the dark about guns. And, let's set up the Biden narrative that guns are really dangerous. Now, it's probably likely that there was no accomplice here, that he, might have acted alone. The thing you could point out here, like in Toronto, the Alex Manassian van attack. He didn't need a gun. He could have, gone in with a van and crashed it through there. So this guy looks like he wanted to kill some Jews. So he went on a little rampage and found the Jews he wanted. He could have ran them over with his car. He could have attacked them with the knife. He could have done a lot of different things. He just happened to use a gun, right? Okay. Now, there's going to be another thing. I'll get into this later, but yes, this suspect was known to the FBI beforehand, and I'll sort of back up the FBI, and I'm going to use this in the same context of the gun ban, and this is the same thing. Yes, he was known to the FBI, and a lot of these terrorists end up being known to the FBI beforehand, but there's a lot of people on the FBI suspected list who have, ISIS affiliations or affiliated with a radical mosque or here, there, or there, and you can't arrest, the 20,000 Muslims you suspect of being involved in the next mass shooter because, yes, maybe 3 of them of that 20,000 will go on to commit the terrorist attack, but the other 20,000 have rights. And you can't just violate the constitutional rights in certain cases because then, it goes against the others. So it's a good thing that the FBI respects the Fourth Amendment, and it's a bad thing that Biden doesn't respect the Second Amendment. We're going to tie these two things together later. Now here's where we get into more, we'll say, conditional proof that he probably was some sort of jihadi. So this is again the family. Okay. Alassi, whose family immigrated from Syria, may have been suffering from mental illness, according to his 34-year-old brother, Al-Awali Alassi. No documented history of mental illness, but the brother says he has mental illness. This is exactly like the family in the Danforth shooting in Toronto, claiming mental illness with no proof of mental illness and then going down on it. And we're going to stop here again. I know we've only got one sentence into this, but it has to be said. Mental illness is not an excuse for evil. It's not. People with mental health issues are less likely than the general population to commit a violent crime and more likely to be the victim of a violent crime themselves. So what was his history of mental health? Nebulous term, right? So this is why I freak out every Bell Let's Talk day, because the same people who care so much about mental health will do the worst thing possible, which is scapegoating mental health issues whenever something doesn't fit their narrative. So whenever there's a tragedy like this, right, the left who on Mental Bell Let's Talk Day will be like, oh my God, stigmatizing mentally ill people is murder. Oh my God, you're hurting them. That statement is true. But then they'll be the first ones to put the worst type of stigma on mentally ill people, because every time there's a mass shooter and it doesn't fit the media's narrative, well then they'll say, oh, this is mental health. So it builds the perception, oh, people with mental health issues are dangerous. Loaded guns, they might go off and murder anyone at any moment, when if you look at the statistics, they are less likely to do said thing. So this is in no way an excuse. But do you notice how it's just being tacitly just accepted as an excuse by the left, who will claim to care about mental health issues? All right, here we get into more lies or more conflicted things. The brother told CNN Tuesday that the high school bullies made fun of Alassi's name and for being Muslim, and that he may have contributed to him being antisocial. There's going to be evidence that contradicts this later, so keep this one in your memory bank. Alassi had become increasingly paranoid around 2014, believing he was being followed and chased, according to his brother. At one point, the young man covered the camera on his computer with duct tape so he could not be seen, said his brother, who lived with Alassi. He always suspected someone was behind him, someone was chasing him, Alassi said. We kept a close eye on him, and when he was in high school, he would say, someone is chasing me, someone is investigating me. We're like, come on, man, there's nothing. He just closing in on himself, the brother said. Alassi was not, okay, here's the big lie, okay? And this type of lie indicates that it is most likely a jihadist attack, or adds evidence to that. Alassi was not very political or particularly religious, according to his brother, who said he never heard the young man threaten to use violence. I'm going to repeat this sentence because this is what we're going. Alassi was not very political or particularly religious, according to his brother, who said he never heard the young man threaten to use violence. Lies. Now, there have been unsubstantiated reports, and it might come out true, that he was potentially targeting Trump rallies back in the fall. Now, you've probably seen, and I'm going to show you, there's all the proof of him posting all the anti-Trump stuff on his social media. You've seen the anti-Trump stuff. But what I'm going to show you is actually the proof that he actually was quite religious. So bring up proof number one. I'm just going to give you 3 examples of facts that Alassi was actually religious. Here he is, linking to something, Muslim Hub, sharing some, Muslim doctrine on social media. Now, I'm not saying, look at him, he's Muslim. This is a sign of terrorism, being Muslim. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying your family claiming that you weren't religious when you were religious if you did an Islamic jihadist attack to cover for the Islam in general, that is a sign of jihadism. So let's bring up number 2 here. This is the second, thing we have here. So here he is making a very sort of radical Islamist claim. Basically, Mary wears a hijab, Jesus doesn't eat pork and prays on his knees. How much more evidence do you need to show that they are Muslims? So this is like one of the things Muhammad did is he basically tried to claim that all the prophets of your religion were actually Islamic prophets. That made it easier for people to convert, right? It makes it easier to convert Christians if you say, well, you don't have to give up on Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is actually a prophet of Islam. Jesus Christ was a Muslim, right? Moses was a Muslim. Paul, all these people were actually Muslims. They're Islamic prophets. Now, fun fact on this, according to Islam, you're allowed to believe in Jesus Christ and still be a Christian, but you're not allowed to believe that he died and was resurrected. That is considered blasphemy in Islam. So it was actually Allah deceived the great, who is the greatest at deception, that's what the Quran says, deceived everyone into believing that Jesus was crucified and then resurrected. That is a deception done by Allah according to the Quran. So you're allowed to believe in Jesus, but you just can't believe he's the Son of God. You cannot believe that he was crucified, and you cannot believe that he then was resurrected. I think most Christians would say that, no, that's actually what we believe in Christianity. But that is not what you're allowed to believe as a Christian under Islamic law. But these claims that Jesus and Mary were actually Muslims is usually a pretty radical Islamist claim, because most people who aren't Christian, aren't Muslim, just have brains, know that Islam was started in the 7th century. Jesus, born in year 0. The current calendar is the birth of Jesus, right? Kind of in there. So to claim that Jesus was a Muslim, 650 years before Muhammad was even born is an asinine claim. Yet this is often a claim made by Islamists. So to claim that the man wasn't particularly religious, yet he's going around claiming that Mary and Jesus, born 600 plus years before Muhammad even touched the planet, that's a pretty outlandish religious, hardcore religious Islamic belief. All right, let's bring up proof number 3 times the charm, that here he is just sharing, this is what true Islam is, and here's some other stuff from Muslim Hub where he's just, there's overly benign stuff, and again, not saying, look, he's sharing, nice verses of the Quran, this makes him a terrorist. It doesn't, right? But it shows that here he was as a, religious, he was religious, and he was political. We had the exact same thing in the Danforth shooting, right? So this is what it mirrored, right? In Toronto, we had, Faisal Hussein go to Pakistan, spend, tens of thousands of dollars there, had a weapons cache of AK-47 stuff in his home, and then the family, who I've learned a lot about, and there will be a book coming out hopefully later this year by John Goddard, which should give you even more depth and pretty much convince you that this family is not adhering to Canadian values. And I'm not going to, give away the sort of exclusive scoops that he's going to break in the book, but it is pretty clear that in Toronto, the Danforth shooting was a jihadist terrorist attack that got covered up by Muslim Brotherhood activists and the family under the guise of mental health, and it wasn't really a religious thing. He was, it was schizophrenia, and it was depression, and he was being bullied, and blah, 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 blah. So, again, this is lies, and we're going to go into other parts of it. So again, here's CNN running sympathy for the shooter. And again, this is going to contradict every other leftist narrative, right? Because you saw, and especially last week, right? What does the left try and do? They'll claim that whenever the shooter is white, The media will start to make excuses. We'll talk about how nice he was as a child, how he was quiet, and how no one suspected this. And it's not to build sympathy for the attacker in these scenarios, usually. It's usually to show that, like, oh, crazy people can sort of come out of nowhere, is kind of usually the narrative they try and build. It's willfully misinterpreted and then used to further claims that everything is white supremacy. But here you have actually CNN running deflective propaganda saying this is really a result of bullying and mental illness that resulted in mass murder. So they're already trying to play the sympathy game for this shooter. Now, the left will ignore this and forget that, again, every time there's an Islamic terrorist attack, the first story is Muslim community afraid of backlash. The backlash never comes, but they're still terrified of it. That's always the number one thing, right? Was it bullying? Was it caused by Islamophobia? Did America bomb Iraq, and this, person from Libya was so upset because, he was just defending Islam or whatever. Okay, so let's continue. The entire thing surprised me, Al-Awlasi said of the Monday shooting. I never would have thought he would do such a thing, never would have thought he would kill. Still can't believe it. I'm really sad for the lives that were wasted, and I feel sorry for all those families. We lost a brother, even if he is the killer. Again, like, the brother's allowed to be surprised and shocked, like, I'm not going to bash him from, being sad right now. Aside from the knife he used for cooking, Al-Awlasi did not know his brother to carry a firearm or any other weapon. I find that hard to believe, living with him. Al-Awlasi confirmed the handcuffed man seen in footage bleeding from his leg being led away from the scene with his brother. Al-Awlasi said he did not know why his brother went to the King Scoopers on Monday. Police interrogated him and another brother, according to Al-Awlasi, who said the authorities searched their home in pre-dawn hours on Tuesday. They searched every corner, every piece of clothing. The family emigrated from Syria in 2002, the brother said, and lived in Ardvaria since 2014. Facebook has shut down Facebook and Instagram accounts belonging to the suspect, a company spokesperson said Tuesday. Ahmed Al-Awlasi, who was born April 17, 1999, attended Arva West High School starting in March 2015. He graduated in May 2018, according to the public school. The suspect made statements to investigators, Doherty said. We're collecting those statements now, providing those in weeks ahead. Doherty said Maris' suspect was wounded in the leg during the exchange of gunfire. The gunman was taken into custody at around 3:30 Monday, transported to hospital where he is in stable condition. Oh my God, America is an Islamic supremacist country because they gave him medical attention. Oh no, right? The officer slain, whatever. Okay. The victim, Colorado, blah, blah, blah. All right, so let's go on another thing. So here's perfectly the claim. I'm going to read this. It's a quote from a national security expert in Canada. So Tom Quiggin is an expert on Islamic extremism. And, here is the tweet of basically him saying that Al-Awlasi had a history of threatening people, with legal threats. A Boulder shooter threatened fake hate crime charges against classmates he attacked. So this is, published by Paul Joseph Watson, this particular article. So some people might say, oh, Paul Joseph Watson, he's whatever, far right, you can't trust him. He once did something on InfoWars. Fine. This exact same information appears in the, the Denver Post. So we're going to read the Denver Post article. Okay? 21-year-old Arva man in Monday's mass shooting was violent, short-tempered, and paranoid during high school, his former classmate said Tuesday. So violent temper, right? Again, this is the brother saying he'd never hurt a fly, never, other than a kitchen knife, I'd never seen him wield a weapon. A lot of this seems to be lies. He seems to have been spurred on as a penchant for antisocial behavior. Ahmed Al-Awlasi is suspected of killing 10 people at the grocery store Monday when he walked around 2:30 p.m., began shooting, according to law enforcement. He was taken into custody an hour later with a gunshot wound in his leg. Al-Awlasi was hospitalized for treatment and expected to report to the Border County Jail Tuesday to face 10 counts of first-degree murder. He attended the high school in 2015, blah, blah, blah. Okay, he was on the wrestling team in his junior and senior years. He was kind of scary to be around, said Dayton Marvel, a teammate on the wrestling team. Al-Awlasi once had an outburst and threatened to kill people during an inter-team match, Marvel said. His senior year, during the wrestle-offs, to see who would make varsity, he actually lost his match and quit the team and yelled out in the wrestling room that he was going to kill everybody, Marvel said. Nobody believed him. We were just kind of freaked out by it, but nobody did anything. He said he did not like spending time with Al-Awlasi, and Al-Awlasi was not close with anyone on the wrestling team. Another teammate, Angel Hernandez, said that Al-Awlasi got into a fight in the parking lot after the match. The other wrestler was just teasing him and goes, maybe if you were a better wrestler, you would have won. Alassi lost it and started punching him. Hernandez said Alassi frequently appeared to be paranoid and perceived slights against him, and Marvel said Alassi was often concerned about being targeted because of his Muslim faith. Again, so here we have him not being targeted because of his Muslim faith, but him being afraid of being targeted for his Muslim faith, essentially oppressing himself. He would talk about him being a Muslim and how if anyone tried anything, he would file a hate crime and say they were making it up, Marvel said. It was a crazy deal. I just knew he was a pretty cool kid until something made him mad. Then whatever made him mad, he went over the edge, way too far. Yeah, this sounds like someone who would be seduced by a terrorist ideology and go shoot up a bunch of Jews, right? Again, what you'll learn from this article is like people thought of him as like, again, a pretty cool guy, decently well-adjusted, except if there was one minor slight against him or perceived slight, he had massive anger management issues and sociopathic tendencies. This is the type of people who, when you have radical Islamic rhetoric pushed on them, are then likely to turn violent and take it into mass murder, right? I made the video yesterday saying, is this a woke terrorist attack or a jihadi terrorist attack? And I outlined the case that this actually might be inspired by woke ideology. The more evidence that comes out, it looks like it's both, right? It looks like it's a confluence of Anwar al-Awlaki and Ibrahim X. Kennedy that's swirled around. And by Ibrahim X. Kennedy, I mean the general woke, America's the most evil place in the world, blah, 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 and all of that type nonsense to justify this terrorist attack. Okay? He was always talking about how people were looking at him and there was no one ever where he was pointing people out. He always thought he was messing around with us or something. In 2017, Alassi, then 18, attacked a classmate at Advara West High School, according to an affidavit filed in the case. He punched the classmate in the head without warning, and then when the boy fell to the ground, Alassi continued to punch him. The classmate suffered from bruises and cuts to his head, according to the affidavit. So there's affidavits being signed prior to this that he had just basically assaulted a kid when he was 18. And the brother, never was he ever violent. This just came out of nowhere, purely mental health, and he was being bullied. So this is actually the evidence that points more towards jihadism, the fact that the family is not being honest. This is exactly the same thing as the Danforth shooting. It's the same lies being pushed. And this is a very common tactic of jihadists, is once they commit a jihadist terrorist attack, the families then get up and lie to the press saying he wasn't that religious, this had nothing to do with Islam, and mental health. He was just mental health stuff. Was there, you were very concerned about his mental health. Did he ever see a therapist? No. Did he ever get diagnosed with mental health diseases? No. Did he ever try and treat the mental health? No. But post-mortem, after he commits a terrorist attack, well, then we just blame it tacitly on mental health, and we're all going to ignore the fact that people with mental health issues are less likely to commit violent crimes than the general population. Witnesses told police they didn't see or hear any reason for Alassi to attack the classmate. Alassi told officers that the classmate had made fun of him and called him racial names a week earlier, according to the affidavit. So again, this is a person who does not have proportional response. Even if, he was made fun of weeks earlier, this seems to be a one-time thing, and it seems like this is the type of person that deserves to be ridiculed because he's a violent psychopath. Despite his short temper, Hernandez said Alassi could actually be also quite friendly and joyful. The sad thing about this is if you're really going to know him, he was a good guy, Hernandez said. Whenever you went up to him, he always so joyful and nice, but you could tell there was a very dark side to him. If he did get tickled off by something, within a split second, it was like something would take over, like a demon, and he'd just unleash his anger. Another former classmate, Keaton Haidt, said he took weightlifting class with Alassi and never knew him to be violent. Haidt liked Alassi's quick wit and sharp comebacks during locker room banter. He was super cool and super funny, Haidt said. Never violent jokes about people or America or anything. Okay, one of the things you have to understand about terrorists, especially, jihadist terrorists and all this, and the ideologically motivated terrorists. Yeah, we might say, the terrorist rhetoric people with mental health issues and loners might be more susceptible to this, but that's actually not really the case. You would be really surprised how normal the average terrorist is. The average terrorist is a normal guy, they believe in, this and that, they have family and love, but they just imbibe a radical ideology. Some people go into cults, and they're normal, but then you get them into this weird cult, and then the cult is their life, right? For a lot of people who are Islamic terrorists, they're normal, except they just have a radical Islamist worldview, and these normal guys, you'd be surprised how normal and well-liked and well-adjusted a lot of people who went off to join ISIS are. And, One of the things that we will say after this is we just need more education. If people were more educated, then this wouldn't happen. Now, education does reduce the percentage of crimes committed for almost everything. The more educated you are, the less likely you are to commit sexual assault. The more educated you are, the less likely you are to murder. However, there is one crime that the more educated you are, the more likely you are to commit, and that is Islamic terrorism. The more educated you are, the more it's not a poor people thing. It's educated, upper middle class. You look at a lot of the people in ISIS. A lot of them are doctors. A lot of them are engineers. A lot of them are university educated. This isn't a matter of poorly educated people, right? You look at the Holocaust. I'm not going to blame that on radical Islam, but I'm just as a point of, does education mitigate evil, right? Germany at the time was one of the most educated, industrial, modern places. At the time, the Weimar Republic was thought of as the strongest democracy in the world and looked to as a model. Very highly educated. Did that highly educated society, was it immune from the horrors of the Holocaust? No. Look at almost every communist republic, except for Pol Pot, which was exactly the opposite. But you look at the rise of the Soviet Union, communism was created by the educated class and, the purges, got to purge everyone else. Education didn't prevent them from the evil they committed. Now again, the exception here is Cambodia, which was like explicitly anti-intellectual communism, but still, education does not make people immune from acts of evil. Yes, it makes you less likely to do a lot of different crimes, but, to just say that, if we just educate people more, then no one would be joining ISIS. And if Muslims weren't poor and discriminated against, no one would be joining ISIS. All of those claims are not true. Okay, so Alassi lived with his family in Avara subdivision on West 65th Palace, a quiet neighborhood of a single-family homes. Neighbors said the household appeared to be multi-generational with a large number of family members living there. The home was owned by Ali Al-Alassi, who was also a nearby resident that was closed Tuesday. James Poling moved her business a few doors down from the restaurant just over a year ago and said that she ate there frequently. Employees there gave Poling a discount as she returned the favor. Poling said she didn't know that everyone in the family by name, but she never had a negative experience at the restaurant. Employees would go out of their way to offer food to a homeless woman living behind the restaurant, she said. I've been in the shop for a while and they've given food, and that's just very kind. It was not immediately clear Tuesday whether Al-Assi's family knew of the plan to attack King's Scoopers. A relative told investigators Monday that night that she'd seen Al-Assi playing with a gun that looked like a machine gun about 2 days prior, according to the affidavit. Al-Assi about having bullets stuck in the gun and was playing with the gun. He told the affidavit said the others in the home became upset that the gun inside and took it from him. The relative told police, although she believed that it had later been returned to him. Al-Assi purchased the Rodger AR-5560 pistol the day before the attack, according to police affidavit released Tuesday. Witnesses to the shooting described the gunman as firing a patrol rifle, Border Police said. On the Facebook page, the picture belonged to Al-Assi, has since been removed. He thought he students hacked his cell phone. I believe part racism for sure, he replied. I believe someone spread rumors about me which are false, and maybe this set it off. In other posts, the user expressed anti-LGBTQ sentiments and warned about the perils he perceived of too much government control. Okay. Again, so you have Al-Assi being reported here to have some pretty anti-LGBTQ views. Who tends to have that, right? This tends to be linked to religious beliefs, right? Or, this is what we do to attack, Christians. We call them anti-LGBTQ, right? And we would run the same for other Abrahamic religions, which also do not support gay marriage. So again, this runs directly counter to the claim that he was not political and he was not religious, which seems to be, abject lies at this point. Okay. So where are we now? We've done about half an hour plus on this little topic here, and let's sort of bring it into the fold, okay? Let's connect all the dots. He drove 25 miles away from his house to pick a particular location. Now, can people with mental health issues, be, harried by their demons, let's say, and then forced to commit violent acts? Yeah, it's true. You can have the criminally not responsible act defense. To be criminally not responsible, you wouldn't be in control of your thoughts. Now, Canada loves doing this. We love getting people who explicitly say, I'm doing this for ISIS, scream Allahu Akbar while stabbing people, and then we claim, oh, schizophrenia. And I have friends with schizophrenia who have had voices in their head, who have told them to commit violent acts, but they choose not to because they still have agency as human beings. Mental illness is not an excuse for evil. People with mental health issues are less likely to be violent than the general population. But here you have someone who the family and the media is now going to claim was inspired by mental illness, but he drove 25 miles and picked a target. Had he, right, again, and he purchased the gun recently, which means he was probably plotting this attack for at least a few months, maybe a year, to get the gun and do it. So there's a lot of premeditation, it looks like, going here. So the fact that this was premeditated, quite clearly there's a lot of premeditation going into this, is going to defeat the mental health narrative. Now, it won't get it out of the media because, a terrorist said mental health, so instead of covering terrorism, we're going to cover, we're just going to blame all of this on mental illness and then pretend that we're allies or whatever it is. So that in itself should defeat the mental illness thing. The fact that it was premeditated probably for months, he was probably filling out all the gun applications with murderous intent in his mind the entire time. Then he drove 25 miles an hour away and picked a target. As I've shown, this target, from what I've seen in the Denver area and what I've heard, it likely was chosen as a spot that was facilitating Jewish shoppers during Passover. So this is likely, and we don't know this is exactly the motive, but again, why was this specific location targeted? Why this grocery store? Why this time? This is the week before Passover, where lots of Jews would be shopping for kosher food, right? The timing and the place link up with an Islamist ideology, right? So it's two data points that sort of connect here. Then we have the fact that the family is clearly lying to cover the Islamic element to it. Now, the irony is here, if they had said, yes, he was religious, but this probably has nothing to do with Islam, they just didn't, they're allowed to say, yeah, he was, Muslim, but, that's not really what to do with it. He was nonviolent. I understand what they're doing, but that's what a normal person would do. But what an Islamist would do is just claim and lie, try to lie and deceive to push the narrative, to help, advance the caliphate. What they would do is they'd say, yeah, even though they know their brother was Muslim, say, no, he wasn't really a Muslim. He wasn't into politics. He wasn't into religion, even though it's very clear he was into politics and religion. So here you have premeditated mass murder, right? Picking of a target, the target being the likely hub of where Jews would be, which is frequently an indicator of Islamic terrorism, right? See the Charlie Hebdo attacks, see the Mumbai terrorist attacks, right? This is a common indicator. Another link, and then you have the family lying in the exact pathology of other jihadist lies, i.e. the Danforth shooting, right? Link them all together. Now, the reason why I'm so, dead set on covering this is because there's a very good chance that I'm going to be the only one in Canada taking, this narrative to your airwaves because everyone else will want to ignore it. And the proof I'm having of this is the Danforth shooting. Right, the Danforth shooting was covered up by the police force. Right, they found weapon caches in his home. The family tried to stifle the police investigation. The brother was in a coma because he was involved with chemical weapons trafficking. So, but the family just hired a Muslim Brotherhood operative to say mental health issues. This was mental health issues. They barred the door to the police. They are openly hostile to the officers trying to investigate. And then the media portrayed them as the real victims. And then over a year later, years down the line, we still do not have the truth from the investigators. The only people who are willing to tell the truth are alternative media sources. All right, we published in the National Telegraph, the pretty comprehensive everything you need to know about the Danforth shooting. The article by John Goddard, who is researching this entire thing, and hopefully his book does come out soon. And then I can talk about the other explosive details in that book, which I'm going to highly recommend you read because there's a lot more to this case than you've known. Even if you've watched my show and read the article, there is still more to come out. And I'm not going to, there's still a trial happening in, I believe, this spring, which will be covered. So stay tuned. But again, this follows the exact same pattern of other jihadist terrorist attacks. So you have sort of this sort of triangle of evidence right here where everything sort of points towards jihadist terrorist attack. Now, is there maybe a woke element of it too? You know, maybe this was, he perceived America as a horrible Islamophobic nation, even though it gave his family the chance to start a business and build a life of prosperity, right? It's very likely that, you know, he was radicalized by maybe Anwar al-Awlaki, and I said, and Ibrahim X. Kennedy and his intellectual acolytes. So there's your sort of triangle pointing to it. And the reason I bring it up is because we have evidence now that this was probably motivated by some sort of either, you know, leftism and jihadism, or a mixture of left-wing anti-Western rhetoric coming from the West and, you know, jihadist rhetoric. This reminds me a lot of the Ohio State attack. I think it was in 2016, where the Ohio State guy, you know, took out a machete and then, you know, started attacking people, and he was, you know, taken out by a campus officer. I don't think he killed anyone, but it was like the Somalian refugee or something. And if you looked at his writings, like, yes, he mentioned, I'm doing this because Anwar al-Awlaki and whatever, but I sort of read through it and said, this guy actually wasn't radicalized by the Quran so much as he was radicalized by Ohio State University. It was pretty clear that he had imbibed the views of the radical left and the intellectual academic elites. Heavy quotation marks there on academic and elites there. But it was pretty clear that he was also pretty much radicalized by Ohio State, which basically took him and told him, as a Somalian refugee, America hates him as a Muslim because, you know, there was no prayer room for him. But then there was a prayer room for him, but the prayer room was used for other things as well. It wasn't just specifically an Islamic prayer room. It was a multi-faith prayer room that was used. And like, this was part of what drove him off the edge, because if you go to college, you take a college course, what college professors will teach you in history classes is not history. It's basically 6 degrees of Noam Chomsky's ideology. It's the Noam Chomsky ideology that I call this the white power left. There's something I call the white power left, which, you know, it believes that racism is a metric of power and privilege and all that, right? So the whites are the most powerful. But also you see it manifest in the ideas of Noam Chomsky going forward, which then trickle down, is that every bad thing, right, that a country does, well, it's actually not their fault. It's the fault of either America or the British colonialism, or Israel, or, I mean, who they classify as white. But what I'm saying is the classic example is Iran, right? Everything wrong with Iran, what the left will pretend to do is say it is a result of a coup thrown in 1953 where they overthrew the democratically elected prime minister. And like, all that is wrong, right? Again, it's not the Americans that didn't start the coup. Mossadegh, he was in violation of the Constitution. He had pulled illegal means to stay in power. He was outvoted. He was kicked out. Then, according to the Constitution, the Shah had the right to remove him because he had done that. Then he monopolized Parliament and he kicked his enemies out of Parliament. So then everyone who opposed him then voted to keep him in power. And then the people threw a coup to get him out with the Shah. And then after the people are on the street trying to remove him, then is when the Americans and the British came in and supported that coup to take Mossadegh, the socialist dictator, out. Now, this is blamed, and this is misinterpreted, but this is then Noam Chomsky, because he's a white power leftist, what the white power left will then say is everything wrong with Iran is actually because America interfered in 1953. So the actions of all the brown people don't really matter for the next 70 years because the actions of the few white people had more power, right? So in 1953, this happened. It was done by white people. Therefore, it explains everything afterwards. Never mind the revolutions in 1979. Never mind the massacres in 1988. Never mind, you know, the Iran-Iraq war. Never mind everything over the next 70 years that were done by the brown people or the Muslims or whatever. The real thing that happened here, it's white power. We believe in white power because whites are the most powerful. They were there in the 1950s. Therefore, it explains everything going on afterwards. That's what I classify as the white power left. So it's very real that the white power left inspired in part the shooting, but we're also looking at the fact that it's probably now a mixture of white power leftism and jihadism that came to make this come together. And the proof, again, is targeting Jews, driving 25 miles to do it, premeditation, family is lying about the religious beliefs. All this point to jihadist motivations. Now, the other things, the things that I outlined in the video yesterday, point to sort of the white power leftist motivations. And I'm going to have to do a video on the white power left because I think it's a great term. So click like and subscribe if you like white power leftism. That's going to be weaponized against me, isn't it? Right? Just, subscribe and like and, whatever. Get a tattoo of my face onto your face. In the link below, you can click the Patreon and the PayPal if you want to support the lawsuit. Oh yeah, now 2 lawsuits from Aaron O'Toole against me. Second lawsuit filed by Aaron O'Toole against me. We'll talk about it more at another time because there are more important issues than Aaron O'Toole's goons trying to threaten the media to cover up their incompetence or illicit behavior. Okay. Let's get into the response here, because I wanted to tie this to we need to talk about civil liberties, people. Everyone deserves civil liberties. Civil liberties are important, and we must, at all costs, protect the civil liberties of Muslims, because like the white power, one of the beliefs of the radical left, this isn't so much the white power left, but them too, one of the beliefs of the left that is so toxic to the modern world is that life is a zero-sum game. And by zero-sum, I mean if rights are a zero-sum game. So if I have rights, right, that means you have less rights. That's wrong. All our rights are connected. So this is sort of the critical race theorists. What they'll do is, we need to discriminate against white people to lift up black people, right? And this is bad because this treats life and human rights as civil liberties as a zero-sum game, right? And by reducing the rights of white people, you're reducing the rights of everyone, right? So there is no such thing as white rights, black rights, trans rights, right? It's all human rights, and taking away the rights of others does not give more people other rights. And this is a trick played by nefarious actors high up in the democratic, liberal, say leftist elites who are trying to push another narrative. This narrative today is gun control. So who committed this crime? An AR-15. It wasn't an AR-15, but it's still an AR-15. He didn't use an AR-15, but this crime was still committed by an AR-15 style weapon, as CNN purports. Now Joe Biden wants to talk about banning guns, right? Last week, we all had to talk about anti-Asian racism, even though it was probably, anti-Asian racism needs to be talked about, and, I'll probably do a video on trying to help out the Asian community because the type of racism directed towards Asians right now is very similar to classical anti-Semitism, so I'd like to help you fight that if I can. And the great way to do it is actually, is this how we finally wake up the Jewish community and get them to do something productive, is help them fight for Asians? Because Jews don't ever fight for Jewish people. Idiots. Total idiots. Everyone's like this. It's hard to get the Jews to stand up for Jews. It's hard to get the Christians to stand up for Christians. But it's easy to get the Jews to stand up for Christians and the Christians to stand up for Jews. Table this thought. Okay. Remember last week, this was all about white supremacy, even though it was probably an act of vicious misogyny. Okay. And we were allowed to talk about the motive last week because anti-Asian racism and misogyny, those are topics we're allowed to talk about. And I talked about them. But we're not allowed to talk about radical Islam, so what do we talk about now? Gun control. Joe Biden wants to issue an executive order to ban guns. Now, he references the 1995 assault ban, which even the fact checkers, which are pro-Biden, had to fact check and say the claim that it reduced gun violence is sporadic at best, meaning it did not reduce gun violence. The 1994 gun ban and crime stuff did not reduce gun violence. So from an ethic, is this going to work? No, this is not going to work. So the first question, which is the less important question, is, well, I guess both. Is the plan that they're proposing, is it likely going to work? And the answer is likely not going to work. Okay, the evidence shows that what Biden is proposing is not going to work. The more important thing is, this is a question about civil liberties, and if my family is watching, because I know we're going to be talking about gun control this weekend in Passover, and we're all going to be talking about how stupid America is. Oh my God, America is so stupid. How come they can't just ban guns like Canada does? Even though our gun crime, going through the roof. Just, right? And what we're going to do is ban handguns, and we've gone into the stupidity of the gun laws in Canada. But in America, the Second Amendment, you have the constitutional right to bear arms. Now, there's a stupid argument that will be made that, oh, this was made at the time of muskets, so this only referred to muskets. The Founding Fathers didn't know what an AR-15 was. This is a lie. This is an abject lie. the Founding Fathers were quite explicit in their writing that the right to bear arms is not only to protect you and for self-defense. The right to bear arms is also meant to be used as a counterbalance to government tyranny. The Founding Fathers were explicit. They knew that as military and gun technology advanced, this should also be available to the citizens. And it's not that, oh my God, who do you think would win in a war? Like the American army or the citizens? They have drone missiles. You just have an AR-15. You think you're going to win? No, it's not that they're going to win. They think they're going to win. But if you have an armed populace, right, the ability for the military to then go in and inflict massive violations of civil liberties is severely decreased. And also, who in the American army, knowing that there's an armed populace opposing you, is willing to open fire on their own civilians? So you have the armed civilians are meant as a counterbalance to tyranny, and also you expect that certain people from the military, if asked to gun down their own citizens, would defect from the army. This is very explicitly outlined by the Founding Fathers, so the argument that this was made in the time of muskets, so, we need new laws, no. The Founding Fathers were rather explicit that the Second Amendment is also to be used as a counterbalance towards tyranny. Now, what Joe Biden is proposing is an executive order to undermine the Second Amendment. Do you not realize how dangerous this is? My family, very intelligent leftists. I know you're not watching this because you don't care what I have to say, and you pretend to be very, educated, but you just don't listen to anything on the opposite side of the political aisle. Maybe any leftist anywhere. Someone who, maybe you saw this being shared in a Jewish page because I mentioned the anti-Semitic thing and you've kind of been interested and you've made it all the way to the end. Good for you. Here's where we're going to shake you. I need to shake you. Think. Please turn on the brain. Brain on. Flip on switch. If you give the president the power to write an executive order that throws out part of the Constitution, okay? This is the balance of power in America. The legislature creates laws. The president has veto power. The Supreme Court makes sure everything, goes along, everything is constitutional. That's the balance of power. If you give the person in charge, the president, to unilaterally create laws, veto, overrule the Supreme Court, and take away parts of the Constitution, you've just created a dictator. Now, the reason why you're supporting Biden's executive order is you probably think, in your naive state of mind, and you need to think about this, these executive orders, these things, they'll only be used for good things. They'll only be used for good things like curbing the Second Amendment because we really need gun control and we just got to do something. So we need the executive orders. You set the precedent that the president can write an executive order to take away your guns and overthrow the Second Amendment. How about the First Amendment? Right? People just can't have free speech if the president deems them to be too dangerous. Well, that's a bit ridiculous. How about the Fourth Amendment? Illegal search and seizure. Right? So this is where I'm tying it back to the thing I said at the beginning of the show with, this guy was on the FBI's terrorist watch list, or on the watch list of the FBI. If you give President Biden the ability, right, because of this grocery store shooting, right, the precedent you're saying is because there was a grocery store shooting in Colorado, right, therefore, Biden and the president should have the ability to override the Second Amendment for the safety of the public. Biden won't always be president. What if Donald Trump becomes the president again? Or someone like Donald Trump, or someone, let's say the evil Daniel Borden becomes president of the United States. I'm not born in America, but someone like me, right? A hardcore, right-winger. Let's say the person who gets into office is a big-time Islamophobe, right? Does he not have the power, or she, or are they them, right? Does this, non-binary, transgender Islamophobe, do they not have the power to say, because there was a shooting in Boulder, Colorado, and that person was on the FBI's watch list, well, we now need to, just how we throw out the Second Amendment because of this issue, we also need to throw out the Fourth Amendment. So because there's mass shootings of people on the FBI's watch list, I'm now throwing away the Fourth Amendment, saying, signing an executive order, that anyone on the FBI's watch list, if we feel it necessary enough, we can take away their civil liberties and their Fourth Amendment rights, and we can search them and seize them and detain them without cause, right, to prevent another mass shooting. It's for people's safety, right? Just how we're going to take away everyone's guns for everyone's safety, and we're going to give Biden the power to do that, you're going to give the president the exact same power to take away everyone's rights to avoid illegal search and seizure, right? Because of safety, because this guy was on the FBI's watch list, right? So it's the exact same argument. People have the right to bear arms in America. It's the Second Amendment. It's in the Constitution. You cannot just have the president wave a pen and throw out the Constitution because one day soon, there's going to be a president you don't agree with. And do you really want to give that person the power to throw away the Constitution? I don't think so. I think everyone deserves civil liberties. And taking away Muslim civil liberties does not make our lives better. Taking away the civil liberties of whites doesn't make black people better, transgender, straights, whatever it is. We all need the same civil liberties, and Americans do have the right to bear arms. So not only is the proposal Biden's proposing being shown to be not effective at mitigating the thing he wants to mitigate, it is also a gross violation of everyone's civil liberties. Okay. That has been a lot on this one particular topic. Thank you everyone who watched the show this week. If you want to support the show, click the Patreon or the PayPal link at the bottom below. I greatly appreciate it. You know, Aaron O'Toole does not, as he has tried to sue me again. So I've been me, you've been you. I will be back here live on YouTube, premiering on YouTube. This will go up on Facebook and other platforms later. Because Facebook won't let you premiere videos anymore, and it's starting to take away the channel if I claim something is live but not live. So even if I try and stream it through OBS, I'm not even allowed to do that because they can nuke the page. Who even knows? This is also stupid these days. They've changed everything. So thank you so much for coming. I will see you next week. Everyone, have a happy holidays.